We're going to get started again. Somebody was mentioning, said, well, we need to hear more of the patient perspective. The two ladies to my immediate left are patients, and you'll hear about that, but they're also very strong advocates. The lady on the far left, my far left, is an advocacy leader in the UK, bringing a lot of organizations together, and particularly for people who are over what age?
50.
Over 50. Now, she was talking about sort of for older people. I'm 63. I don't think I'm old. Do you? No, we're not old people, but we need a voice. So we're gonna talk about that. And we're also going to, I think what we do is really just understand the journey to advocacy and really going beyond yourself, whether you were not a patient, but we'll start with the ladies who are patients. How did that start? So I want to start with Julia. Julia Kennedy, your hometown is?
Falmouth in Cornwall.
Okay.
Long way from home.
Okay. Get to see the sea?
All the time, on all three sides of Cornwall.
Okay,
Yeah.
so tell us a little bit about just how you became a patient and how you've now turned that into using your expertise as an academic to reach out and help others.
Okay. Well, the whole patient thing started 3 years ago, 2011, February. I'd had a number of infections, repeat infections, and I was feeling quite tired. So I visited my GP. I was in quite a stressful stage at work, actually. I'd moved into a management position, and I was feeling that was probably at the core of the infections and the kind of general malaise that I was feeling. So I went, completely innocently to the doctor, expecting that I might get a couple of weeks off work, actually, and told to look after myself. Also, I guess because of my age as well, I thought maybe some of this might be kind of menopausal stuff. The last thing I imagined was that I would be sitting in that doctor's surgery a week later, getting a diagnosis of leukemia. So my GP told me that I had a disease called chronic lymphocytic leukemia. Now, prior to my career as an academic, which is what I work as now, I was a nurse for 10 years, and I'd never heard of chronic lymphocytic leukemia. Of course, I'd heard of leukemia, but I hadn't heard of the CL version of leukemia. So when he told me I had leukemia, I had the initial reaction, I suppose, that everybody has, which is, oh my God, that's it. I was 50 at the time. That's it. Life is over for me. Is this going to hurt? What's it going to feel like? How long is it going to take? These are all the kind of questions that I wanted to ask my GP, and I did ask him. But like many GPs, he had very, very little knowledge indeed of chronic lymphocytic leukemia. He wasn't able to answer any of those questions, and he sent me away with doctor's orders, actually, to go and look it up on the internet. And so I was just in a complete black hole, actually, of information. And I'm not actually wanting to have a go at my doctor individually here. He's a very nice man, but I think there's a universal thread of GPs not being particularly well informed with this disease. That might not be the case for everybody, but I think it's certainly what I've seen out there in the communities. So I did. I went away and I looked it up online, and I was researching literally to survive, to see how I would manage this disease and what it actually meant for me and my family and my life. And I had a consultant's appointment set up for 2 weeks later, and in that 2 weeks, I think I did more learning about one thing than I ever have in my entire life, including the degrees and the MAs and anything that I've done officially. That was the steepest learning curve. And what I noticed when I was out there doing that research was that this was a terrifying and kind of isolating experience. Nobody that I spoke to had heard of CLL, but they had heard of leukemia, so they did also think I was going to die quite soon. And I didn't have the knowledge or the experience although I do have the knowledge and experience of internet communications and research, I didn't have the knowledge and experience of this disease to allow me to discern what information that I was finding was actually relevant to me. Because, of course, some of it was terrifying, and I had no idea how to relate generic survival statistics, median survival statistics to my life. I didn't know what kind of CLL I had. I didn't even know what a heterogeneous and varied disease it was. So I could come across quite bad stories, I suppose, if you like, stories of people for whom things had gone not so well, and assumed that was going to be me as well. And I had to learn how to kind of discern through all that information, and I also learned that actually what was out there that helped me most were the communities. It took me about a week to come across the Macmillan community, and then after that the ACOR list. And that's when I realised there are other people out there with this disease. I'm actually not on my own with this disease, that there are people who know massive amounts about this disease and are sharing that information. There are people that are willing to share not just elevated knowledge of scientific research, but also what it's like to wake up in the morning and suddenly think, I've got leukemia, what it's like to have that sort of illness, which is places you somewhere between health sometimes and grave illness other times. And I think that makes us quite a unique group. And that's the point in which I thought, there's so much information here that is not being shared up on the surface, and that this needs to be looked at, it needs to be mined, and it needs to be brought out into the public. People need to be made a bit more aware of what it's like to live with a chronic blood cancer.
And we should mention, so now you're getting a PhD.
Indeed.
And you've been mapping all this.
Yep.
And you've just completed 6 cycles of FCR?
I have, yes.
Do not sneeze on her. Okay.
So yeah, I finished 6 weeks ago, 6 cycles of FCR. So the story is one of my research to kind of survive, but it became one of a kind of mission, I suppose. I felt this mission as a researcher and as an academic to do something bigger with the research that I was doing. So it's not just for me, but actually it becomes about the whole kind of CLL community and all of the other people that are related to that, including doctors, including pharmaceutical companies. I want this kind of what it's like to actually live with a chronic hematological malignancy on a day-to-day basis to be spread a bit further around the people who look after us.
And it may be a book.
There will, I hope, be a book. I'm writing my PhD up this year, and that, of course, will be in very kind of academic terms, but my desire is to spin individual kind of journal papers, so I want to get stuff about what people like you are saying to me in my research into medical journals, not just straightforward academic journals, but I want that to go into the clinical community, and I want to write a book that is relevant to people who have who are living with this kind of disease. It's not just people with CLL, people living with chronic cancers of all kinds. I think sit to some extent in this strange place of not a disease that is well culturally recognised. We have cancer, but people don't look at us and think we are people with cancer. Therefore, they think we're okay. And sometimes we are, but a lot of the times we're not. And I just think it is about raising awareness.
We'll look for you on the BBC. Okay. Now,
I think I'm too old to be
now, we know that we're in a very regulated environment, right? And there's power in us coming together. So first you're a patient, then you say, well, what else can I do? You've been using your academic background now. Tricia, Gardom, tell your story of going from patient in your own life to beyond.
Yeah, I've moved from self-advocacy because I had to, and have become a patient advocate. And it's really only happened in the last 12 months, which is interesting. I don't like labels, I don't like being pigeonholed. And so really I didn't want to be called a patient advocate. I was just myself using my skills. But 12 months ago, I was asked to go to EHA. EHA is the European Hematology Association, where the hematologists were running a symposium, and they wanted a patient to go with them. And they were running a case study which was called, "What do you mean I can't have treatment?" So it was a live role play where a patient for whom there was no current therapy was meeting with their consultant. Very difficult situation. How was it handled? And my role at the end was to comment, as a patient, what I thought could be improved, where I thought the issues were, and how patient advocates might be able to help. This goes way back to my own personal experience when I was diagnosed. Now, it was in 2006, so I'm going to be brief about this because it's a long history. But I was diagnosed with both breast cancer and CLL at the same time. So I had a solid tumour chemotherapy to begin with, and as I was recovering from that, ahead of me was, oh gosh, now I've got to think about my CLL. However, during the period when I was waiting to be treated, had an appointment with the oncologist who said, this is my breast cancer oncologist, he said, have you seen your results? Do you know you've got a high lymphocyte count? And by the way, it's CLL. And because it's CLL, I actually can't treat you. You've got to go away and sort this out with somebody in haematology, and then we'll see if I can treat you for the breast cancer. So, double whammy, what do I do? Well, I found Professor Terry Hamblin. And I found him by looking on the web straight away. I found the CLLSA, who had a little website at the time, very little. But I posed a question on there. I said I had a real problem. I've got 2 cancers. I don't quite know where to turn, and my consultants aren't being very helpful. And I had a reply immediately from the current chairman of the CLLSA. He said, we have 2 advisors. They're both professors in CLL, and they're going to give you an opinion because one of them had been a breast cancer oncologist before he turned to CLL. And I was advised to carry on with my breast cancer treatment and that it might put my CLL in remission as well, which it has done. However, I now have a very interesting dialogue because I'm due for more treatment within probably the next few months. Am I a relapsed patient or am I an untreated CLL patient? And this will affect my options going forward, so I'm very interested in how this is perceived by other people. So what have I been doing in between? I've been running, in the Midlands, I've been running patient meetings for the CLLSA for 5 years. And during that time, I've developed a network of other patients. We keep one another up to date with what's happening. And from time to time, they get into a really difficult situation. And we've become mutual counsellors, which has been really helpful, and I would recommend it to anybody to set up their own local group. And it's this counselling that has helped them ask their consultant the right question. So we have to have a really good dose of reality here. Life is terribly exciting. I mean, we don't want to damp down what's happening. It's all wonderful. However, at the time you need treatment, your options could be limited. And you need to ask exactly the right question to make sure that you know what all the available options are for you. These are your normal rights. You must ask questions. So I've been counselling an individual patient, and in March I had a phone call from her. She said, I'm now doubly relapsed. I've relapsed from FCR, I'm relapsed from BR within 4 years, both treatments. And my doctor says, the only thing that'll help you now is ibrutinib. And he said, go away and fight for it. So she rang me up and said, what on earth do I do? So I was at the time not thinking about running a political campaign. And I put my head around this and I thought, well, I've been going to conferences for years now. I've met all these great haematologists. They've come to speak at my conferences. I'm going to email them. So I emailed Paul Moss, Martin Dyer, Ben Kennedy, you name it, anyone that had spoken at the conference. I said, I have this dilemma. I don't know where to start. Can you stop me making mistakes? And they said, oh, I'll tell you who to talk to. So I got from the world of haematology the inside story on what was happening in ibrutinib. I learned exactly where it was in the regulatory process in Europe. I learnt that if all the UK patients were referred to the Cancer Drugs Fund, it would be bankrupt, so we couldn't go there. I learned how long the approval process was for NICE and how difficult it was going to be to get the right model to go through NICE for the new type of drugs. So there was only one route left, and that was to appeal to the drug company themselves. And you've heard from George Follows today that they have what's called a named patient supply program, which offers the drug on a compassionate basis for a very short period of time to patients who have no other options and have severe deletions. And that this drug is only available till the end of September, when hopefully it will go through all of the correct regulatory processes and will be available to everybody else. Now, will it? We've had a big discussion about this. We focus on price and we like to beat up NICE. What I've been finding, because I've been to visit politicians, I've had a campaign sending letters to MPs, what I've been finding is that yes, you have to work with NICE, but actually who pulls the strings? The budget is held in the Treasury, the drug budget comes from the Treasury, the Department of Health set the parameters by which NICE will judge these things, and all NICE do is implement it. And I'm being oversimplistic here just to make a point, that there's no point just waiting for NICE to turn down ibrutinib, because it'll be too late. So what do? We start with the politicians now. So I drafted a letter, I drafted a briefing note for the MP of the patient who needed ibrutinib, and I made the case. I wrote what these transformational therapies were all about and why the patient needed it. I talked about her personal situation, and then I did a page of the issues. And she read this. She's a very bright lady. Fortunately, she works in the Treasury as well, and she was like this, on the ball. And the patient went to visit her. She'd read the brief. She knew exactly what was coming. And she said, I'll listen to your story, and then we've got to do 4 things. I can contact the drug company, I can contact the NHS England, we can look at the Cancer Drugs Fund, da-da-da-da-da. And she said, I want to know who your patient advocate is, and I want her to work with my case study worker. And that happened the next day. So her case study worker rang me up and said, what should I do? So I told him what he should do, and we should write to the chairman of the drug company. There really wasn't any other way. We needed to know, was there going to be a compassionate access program? When would it be available? Because this patient couldn't wait for anything else. I hope I'm not going on too long.
And there is a compassionate.
There is a compassionate access program. It started at the beginning of May and it will end on the 30th of September. The only way to access it is for your consultant to recommend it as the right therapy for you at the time and to liaise directly with the drug company. I tried many ways of getting into Janssen and pharmacyclics on my own, and they were very good at putting up barriers because they have to. They really can't be seen to be promoting their drug. But I've met them since, and they described me as a bit of a terrier and asked me what my background was, and then thought, oh, we should have asked you that before. Because I've dealt with politicians and big companies all my life, and isn't it interesting that Julia is now using her expertise as an academic for her work, and I'm using my business experience to help patients. And this is where I think we should all say, okay, how could I act as an advocate? What are my skills? What can I offer? Because we can't do it all. I think there are 4 or 5 of us who do all this work. Okay? Just as an example, I was in Milan last week for 3 days. I'm in Cambridge for 2 days. I don't live anywhere near here. I'm going up to Liverpool next week because I'm on the CLL Biobank. The week after, a fortnight later, we're going to NICE in Manchester to try and get the the first appraisal through for ibrutinib versus ofatumumab. We can't keep running at this pace. We're actually patients like the rest of you. So if there's anybody that can help, and we will help you, you haven't got to do this on your own. And the way you do it is you become your own self-advocate, and from there you then start to advocate for other people.
We'll talk more about this. So Kath Parson is the leader of the official name of the organization. I call it OPAAL, but what does that stand for?
It's the Older People's Advocacy Alliance.
Good, I'm glad you said older.
Yeah,
I'm older than my children.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've been getting a heavy dose of CLL. You've been with us 2 days. You've been hearing about it. You're not a patient yourself, but you see parallels across other conditions as well. What do you want to say to these folks so that they can get the care that's right for them?
Okay. Basically, I think I'd like to say don't take no for an answer. What my experience is working across the UK with Macmillan is we have been recruiting and training people over 50, like yourselves, many of you, looking at you from the front, to become peer advocates. And what people want from a peer advocate, it doesn't matter what your background is, you don't have to be academic or professional or whatever, because you're streets ahead of the rest of us, because you have direct personal experience of cancer. And that's what someone who needs help wants. They want someone else to have got that experience, so they don't have to spend their time explaining to someone what it is to live with cancer, whatever cancer you've got. So that's the first thing. The second thing is many people, all the people that we help, want to be helped by someone of a similar age. They don't want to be helped by young people for all kinds of reasons. They want to be helped by someone of a similar age. And the third thing is that's really important to the people that we support is that their advocates are independent. Now, listening to what's been said earlier today, yes, of course, there are medical advocates. There are nurses who advocate with a small a for their patients, but they're not independent advocates because they're part of the system. They're part of the system that's treating you. And the value of having an independent advocate is that they're on the outside looking in. So if you feel you want a second opinion, or if you feel you need to complain about some element of your treatment and care, it is so much easier to do that with an independent person from outside of the system than it is from inside. But I think you asked me what I would say to you, and the biggest thing I would say to you is don't let your age get in the way. Age has nothing to do with anything at all. People are flawed by cancer, whatever their age they are, as Julia said earlier on. She's not an old lady, she wasn't when she was diagnosed, but nonetheless she was completely flawed just with the word cancer. So that happens to all of us. Don't let age get in the way. Dr. Follows earlier on said he doesn't have an ageist attitude towards treatment and care. But sadly, many, many people in the NHS do. Many people look at the age and not the person and think, okay, I'm just giving you a diagnosis of cancer. You are, I don't know, 72, 78, 65, whatever. I don't think you will be able to withstand the rigors of the treatment that it might take to have an effect on your cancer. Therefore, I'm going to put you down a palliative route. And this happens to people. What we have found with the work we have done with Macmillan, with our advocates, and these are peer advocates, they're supported by professionals, we ensure that, and we train them thoroughly and make sure they're well supervised and supported. But nonetheless, they're peers, they're people like you, who are, if you like, experts by experience, okay? And what we have found is that when there is an advocate in the room talking to the medical profession, your SINs, your nurses, or your consultants, then several things happen. First of all, ageism is a lot less prevalent. Doctors will reconsider and consider very carefully the way they're going to talk to you. We don't want to be written off at this stage. So that's what I would say to you. Don't let age get in the way. And I think the second message I'd like to leave you with is the one about you are all experts by experience. Not only those of you in the room that are patients, but all those people sitting next to you, your loved ones, your carers, they too are experts by experience. They're living your life with you. They are touched by cancer almost as much as you are, if not more in some cases. I'd just like to leave you with those two messages.
Well said. So there's a sort of a through line here. So you're, Trisha, say, use your skill to help certainly the CLLSA and at a pivotal time in advocating for the therapies that we hope can be well understood and available appropriately within the UK. You heard Kath say, beyond even CLL, but including that, one-to-one, you may be able to be a mentor and a tremendous support for someone else. And then you also heard Julia talking about using your own skill, maybe in a very specialized way, first to educate yourself and then to help educate others. Now there's one other part of it too, is we are increasingly connected online. I think all of us probably have had various online connections. Tricia mentioned it. For me, that ACOR list, it's the American, what is it, ACOR? It's Association of Cancer Online Resources, 1996. That connected me with the trials and treatment 2,000 miles from my home. And so we all have had different connections that way. Increasingly, we'll be asking you questions in online surveys, and some of you have done that. And that data, done statistically accurate, will help marshal the story that we can tell to MPs, to government, to commissions of what are we living with, how does this affect our life, as well as the clinical information of what they're finding in all the studies, as Dr. Follows said. So we're kind of in it together, and even if this is the first event you've ever come to, you're now not alone. You're part of a community, whether you're a patient or a caregiver, a spouse, a friend. We're all in it together. Anything else you want to say, Julia?
I would just add, I think that the aggregation of big data is something that we can all contribute to, and that actually is, I think, one of the spin-off benefits. But actually, I think that online communication and us staying networked online works with a kind of small A advocacy, which then kind of grow into big A advocacy on a daily basis, just by actually staying connected. Just by those days where you wake up and you might feel you just want to consult someone about perhaps a kind of emotional rocky phase that you've hit, or by a research paper that you've read that you don't quite understand the relevance of to yourself, just that one posting can kind of produce this kind of waterfall response from people out there who will give you the benefit of their advice and their experience from all sorts of different perspectives. Can I just ask, how many people here use, I'm assuming because you're CLLSA UK and health, you probably use Health Unlocked, but my assumption might be wrong. How many people use online communications to talk to each other about their disease here? Okay, so quite a lot. So it reduces that sense of isolation. And earlier, George Follows put up what he called a waterfall map when he was looking at an ibrutinib trial. And it struck me that actually you could produce a waterfall map looking at the things that people were saying to me. 250 people filled in a questionnaire, had 60,000 words from people like you with CLL, having a chance to talk about what it felt like. And I could honestly produce a waterfall map that would replicate that in the sense of the dropping off of the sense of isolation, the dropping off of the sense of fear, the dropping off of the anxiety. It doesn't go away totally. It doesn't make this disease go away. We all still have to live with it. But actually, that kind of staying communicated with each other online, connected with each other online, not only leads to those bigger those bigger kind of benefits that Andrew's talking about with aggregation of data that can help people to make sense of our disease, in the bigger picture. But it leads to a change in how what it feels like to live with this disease on a day-to-day basis. It leads to you having the information to go to your consultant and say, I'm not really sure that I want to take FCR at the moment because there's this trial here, which you, as a general hematologist, might not have heard of because you're not clicking into frontline CLL research every morning with your coffee, as we are, or we might be, or we should be, if we want to stay informed. So that's just...
We're all each other's reporters. One other point that I wanted to ask Tricia about it. So on Patient Power, we did a survey of patients. We got 1,300 responses in 2 weeks from actual patients. No drug company could do that. They don't know your names. They don't know. So somebody's developing a billion-dollar drug, ibrutinib or idelalisib or whatever it is. They would love to know our story, right? Because we're the people who are affected. These surveys we do, and you reporting what's important to you, what are you living with, and then one-to-one help, those sorts of stories as well. But the aggregate data is very important to have impact. Tricia, so we can do more of that. Like with the MPs, for example, and it's really the power of the story, right?
The particular case study that I was working on was, I think, the most direct and powerful way I could have approached the subject. There was a burning need. There happened to be a drug. It was available, but we needed to access it. And I had a motivated patient, a motivated clinician, and as you can see, I'm pretty self-motivated myself. It's been an enormously rewarding experience because this patient has been on the drug for 4 weeks and is psychologically transformed. I can't tell you the difference. I want to do more. How do you address the situation across the board? These are very high-level issues in government, and they're not going to be resolved overnight. It's going to take a long time. It's going to take a lot of campaigning. So after I'd done the initial work with the patient's MP, I developed a generic letter to all MPs, and through the CLLSA newsletter, I asked every patient member if they would send a copy of this letter, please, to their MP. And it posed the issues. It raised the specific question we've been talking about all the time. How are we going to afford these new therapies, these transformational therapies? Because it requires a new way of looking at the world, flexibility, and a new model. I've just posed the question to them. Well, there were 5 of us that worked together, and only 4 other patients volunteered to just send a pre-written letter to an MP. That's all they had to do. Anyway, I'd like more of you, please. We need a real campaign. I spoke to Peter Hillman about this, and he said, the only way to reach your Secretary of State for Health is not if you write to him yourself. The only way he'll listen is if you go via your MP, and your MP writes to the Secretary of State for Health. And when he gets his 500th letter on his desk, he's going to start saying, oh, these people could cause trouble unless we look at this a little more carefully. So at the moment, I've got 1 successful case study with a patient. We've had 9 letters go to MPs, and I've personally visited 2 MPs. So there's a huge amount of work to do, and I need all your help, please. One other route that I went is that sometimes the letters land on what I call a warm desk. The MP wants to take action, they want to hear more about it, and they offer the patient a meeting, and the patient says, ooh, do I know enough now to have a meeting? So I go with them. So the advocate turns up with the patient. It's a bit unkind, really, on the poor old MP, isn't it? Because we've got one person who can plead, I'm the patient, and you've got someone else who probably knows more about the subject than they do. But we will get somewhere. We really will.
You know, there's a model from years ago, not that long ago, though, as HIV therapies were in development, and people were dying, of course, of HIV. and they took to the streets. I'm not saying, I don't know that that's our bent, but the point is, they brought a collective voice together. It was a strong voice. They made their point. It speeded up research, and it speeded up access to life-saving therapies. So you've been hearing about it, right? So then you have to say, well, but I'm just a patient. I'm just living with the terror of this diagnosis. But as Julia did, she got smart. So you get educated. You've been doing that today, or some of you have been to many events or online. Take that education, turn that into self-advocacy that Kath was talking about, and then that turn, be part of group advocacy that'll benefit you and others. That's kind of the pattern. Make sense?
Get
Makes
online.
sense.
You need to be online.
Yeah, so that's how we can connect. We're blessed with this internet now. So is there anybody here who never goes near the internet? Hasn't been there? Gosh.
This lady?
You're older people. Oh my God. No. So,
You need to stop.
We've been told, there are people who say, well, people with gray hair or no hair don't go on the internet. Baloney, right? Or if you don't, you have someone else in your family is very active. That's our connection now, and it's rapid. We have our own BBC, we have our own channels, the video cameras are here. So let's use that connection to be informed, to know you're not alone, and to have the power of advocacy.
Well, thank you all very much.